For any fan of true crime, it's easy to get overwhelmed with the sheer number of documentaries you can find online. But today, we've narrowed it down to 10 of the most compelling true crime documentaries that you must watch. Number 10. Don't Pick Up the Phone, the name of an eerie Netflix docuseries and a warning that shouldn't have been disregarded. The 2022 limited series takes us back to the late 90s, when McDonald's and other fast food restaurants became the setting for very real psychological horror. In the opening shot, the camera focuses on a payphone hanging on a wall. An identity-obscured figure walks up to it and unhooks the device, placing it to his ear. The slow dial tones set the mood. The numbers he's entering are those that would destroy lives, and he did destroy lives. The ringing sound is interrupted by very real news reports. A woman can be heard revealing that many victims have fallen victim to this unbelievable hoax. A caller pretending to be a police officer was convincing enough to, said the next reporter. The sham they referred to was the infamous strip search hoax, a criminal offense that forced Buddy Stump, a now retired detective, to intervene in what would become his first big case. One of the first cases they encountered happened in Mount Washington, Kentucky, back in 2004. Young Louise Ogborn was an employee at a local McDonald's who'd never done anything wrong in her life and was a model employee. One day, though, a call would come in, and Louise would soon find herself standing in her manager, Donna Summers' office. Allegedly, a man had called the police, claiming that a young woman had stolen from them at this very establishment. Subsequently, an alleged officer called the restaurant, describing the man as a match for Louise. The caller then instructed the young woman's manager to perform a rather intimate search. The caller, claiming to be an officer, had Louise strip searched right in the office of her workplace, and this was carried out by no official authority. It was humiliating, and there was CCTV footage to capture the entire incident, footage that would land in Buddy's hands. The detective was shocked and horrified by what he had seen, and was left even more disturbed when he discovered that this wasn't the first time, nor the last, that a strip search hoax had been carried out. These calls had been happening all across the United States for the better part of a decade, one of which dates back to 1999 in Blackfoot, Idaho. The docuseries interviews the victims of this incident, and Elizabeth details her story that left her untrusting and violated. It was the early 2000s, and at least 4 Wendy's in Massachusetts alone became the subject of hoax calls that left the victims wishing the establishments had never picked up the phone. As more cases began to flood through the police stations, Victor Flardy would become involved in the investigations too. He and Buddy investigated cases and calls independently, hoping to identify the source of the harassment. Both detectives discovered that each call had been made via prepaid calling cards, the numbers of which led them to Panama City, Florida, where the local police department introduced the pair, allowing them to connect their individual cases. Through this unexpected knot, they were able to track down the man behind the McDonald's strip search scam. But the damage had already been done. Women were left shattered and humiliated, and it wasn't just through manipulation and the idea of authority, but also through a lack of common sense. Number 9. The 2025 3-part docuseries on the Long Island serial slayings opens with the chilling May 1st, 2010 911 call from Shannon Gilbert, a missing woman running for her life. Additional witness calls reported a young woman screaming and fleeing from an unknown man. Due to Shannon being a street worker, her search was initially low priority, but under pressure from her mother, Mary, police searched the area and discovered a full set of human remains, followed by 3 more near Gilgo Beach, the Gilgo Four: Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello. All were street workers who disappeared between 2007 and 2010. Between March and April 2011, 6 more remains were found, including Valerie Mack, Jessica Taylor, and Karen Vergata, suggesting a serial killer was active. The investigation stalled due to police corruption, but in December of 2011, Shannon Gilbert was finally found in a marsh. The documentary suggests she succumbed to hypothermia while hiding from her pursuer. A previously overlooked tip later led to an arrest, revealing one man linked to uninvestigated disappearances and homicides spanning 2 decades, with the documentary suggesting earlier police action could have certainly prevented further deaths. Gone Girls, the Long Island serial killer, is a must-watch for anyone who loves true crime and proper justice. Number 8. Can I tell you a secret? It doesn't sound like it, but this simple question was enough to send shockwaves through the social media community and strike fear into the hearts of those who were its victims. If there were a true crime subcategory called What Happens When Only Women Are in Danger, this documentary would be it. There's a lot that happens when only women are in danger, and helping them doesn't make the list. Instead, such cases are met with police dismissal, a shrug that says you asked for it, and an atmosphere of contempt. So, can I tell you a secret? All of these listed features make it into the 2-part docuseries, unsurprisingly. In the forefront, we're introduced to 3 victims, Abby, Zoe, and Leah. What are they victims of, you may be wondering? A relentless, life-ruining cyber stalker that uprooted their entire existence and left them looking over their shoulder more often than they already had been. Each of these women was once happy and confident. Their attractiveness and influencer persona aided their strong media presence. The very shrug that may be gestured by some in the dismissive "you asked for it" aspect of our non-existent subcategory. Then came that thunderous, life-ruining, earth-shattering, daunting message, "Can I tell you a secret?" A message from the docuseries is read in an eerie, distorted voice, capturing the sinister intentions that lie in that question. Abby, Zoe, and Leah didn't know each other, but the emergence of this very message meant that they were about to, whether they liked it or not. Abby Furness, a dancer and influencer, had her social media infiltrated by this cyber stalker, who was also a hacker and expert sleuth. He was able to figure out who her friends and family were, where she worked, what she did, where she went, and when. Once all this information was at his fingertips, the message tone sounded, and slowly, Abby's whole life began to unravel. The stalker impersonated her online, started flirtatious conversations with friends, sent intimate photos of her to her boss, and even convinced her then-boyfriend that she was unfaithful, ultimately leading to their breakup. By the end of the 2-year-long escapade, Abby was left friendless, and all those connections she tried so hard to establish were eradicated. Though she may have felt like it, Abby wasn't alone, and she wasn't the only victim of this insane individual's attack. Zoe Jade Hallow, now a mechanic and model, was stalked by the same poser, with her friends and family members becoming victims of abuse at the hands of the anonymous assassin who hijacked their lives. In one instance, he posed as Zoe's boyfriend's father, creating fake social media accounts to chat up teenage girls. It was nothing short of damaging, and Zoe was viewed as being at the center of it all. Leah Marie Hambley, now a business owner and influencer, was victimized through means of psychological torture. The cyberstalker created fake social media accounts in her name and contacted people in her inner circle, including family friends and their husbands. The hacker used paranoia to ruin Leah's life and made her believe that he was always there, somewhere, watching from a distance and waiting to pounce. But this whole endeavor was nothing more than a simple case of cyberstalking. Something simple and quick could end the torment. Something as simple as just going to the police, who can trace the numbers and track down who was behind it, and put a stop to it all. The authorities would do something, right? Zoe was one of the victims who took the matter to law enforcement, despite her stalker's warnings not to. As she sat in the interview room, she began to feel embarrassed at her situation. She felt as though her modeling portfolio, present on her social media accounts, which she'd shown to police officers as she detailed the distressing case, meant that if she wanted to display a certain thing, she should expect a certain reaction. It was this thought process that dominated the interview room. Zoe told them that she had the number of the person who was behind this attack on her life, and insisted they could trace the calls and messages and where they were coming from. But the response was, "We can do that, but we only do it for high-profile cases like assault or homicide." In essence, this meant we're not going to do anything until something like that happens. It was a daunting realization for the women that no one, not even the authorities, was going to protect them, and they were forced to figure it out on their own. Still unaware that others were going through this very torment, each victim began to suspect anyone and everyone in their lives, because surely there can't be one single person behind this. Or can there be? Number 7. The documentary Hunting the Ultimate Con Man begins with a candid 2020 conversation between siblings, Sophie and Jake Clifton, prompted by the director to speak to the camera, as if it were their missing mother, Sandra. They reassure her that they're there for her. Sandra was a victim of the Puppet Master. The series jumps between two timelines, 2011 to 2013 and 1993, laying out two different cons by the same person. In the first timeline, the siblings recall their youth when Dave entered their lives after their mother's divorce from Mark. Claiming wealth, Dave wooed Sandra and quickly moved in after an impromptu trip to Spain, during which Duran Duran's Ordinary World played repeatedly. Dave, a master manipulator, systematically brainwashed the children against their father, Mark. Unable to cope, both Jake and later Sophie moved out, reuniting with Mark, and soon after, Sandra and Dave inexplicably disappeared. The documentary reveals that the Cliftons were not the only victims. In 1993, Harper Adams' agricultural college student John Atkinson was conned by a barman named Rob, claiming to be an MI5 agent investigating the IRA and John's friend's death. Rob claims John's roommate was a target and convinced John, his girlfriend Sarah Smith, and their friend Maria to leave. During their escape, Ordinary World connected the two timelines. John's Rob is the Cliftons' Dave, later identified as notorious con artist Robert Hendy Freegard. Sarah's father grew suspicious after tracking her movements and realizing her fellowship was a lie, orchestrated by the con man. Though revelations are made, the documentary concludes with unanswered questions. Where are Sarah and Sandra? And who else fell victim to Robert Hendy Freegard? Number 6. She was no stranger to the police, routinely calling 911 on kids playing nearby. An American tragedy unfolds through body care and interrogation room footage. This is the summary that accompanied Netflix's 1 hour and 38-minute long documentary, The Perfect Neighbor, a film that the creators wish they didn't have to make, a film that should come with a distressing footage warning, a film that itself should serve as an admonition. The film starts off with silence, interrupted by static of the police radio. 2968 Code 2, a distorted voice announces. Code 2, urgent response but not with full emergency lights and sirens. The call came in on the 2nd of June 2023 at 9:01 p.m. The Marion County Sheriff's Office was sent to a neighborhood in Ocala following a trespassing report. They didn't know it yet, but that Code 2 was about to become a Code 3. 911, what's the address of your emergency? The dispatcher asks. A shaken voice disrupts the second-long quiet. He claims that someone has been injured, and the mention of a firearm sends the police cruiser's engines to a roar, and speeding off to the Quail Run neighborhood of Ocala, Florida, where a devastating scene would unfold, the culmination of unrelenting conflict dating all the way back to January of 2021. Since then, and for the next 2 years, deputies from the sheriff's office would find themselves responding to 6 documented calls placed by Susan Louise Lawrence that sent them to Quail Run, body cams rolling and capturing each tumultuous visit. The calls were often for trespassing, in which Lawrence claimed that her neighbor's children were entering her property. In actuality, the neighborhood children were occupying a grassy patch adjacent to her home, a space she reported as hers. The children were those of Ajike Shentrell Owens, who wasn't about to force them to stay indoors and maintained during each visit that they weren't trespassing. Other residents of the area described the claimant as being constantly angry about the presence of children, whom she would harass daily, spewing hateful words at them as she did so, including the label of slaves. The documentary, composed primarily of body cam footage, captures each of these statements from neighbors, the victims, and the claimant-turned-criminal. 6 times, officers would visit the neighborhood, and 6 times they explained the law to Lorich, and 6 times they would leave believing that the issue had been dealt with, only for it all to culminate in a life-ending finale on the 2nd of June 2023, when the Code 2 turned to a Code 3. At 9 p.m., deputies were responding to one of Lorich's trespassing calls, during which she alleged she was being harassed and was now feeling threatened by the children. That day, it would be discovered that hours earlier, Lorich had thrown a pair of roller skates at the child of Owens, striking him in the foot and leaving him injured and distraught. She'd also allegedly swung an umbrella at another. At 9:01 p.m. on the 2nd of June 2023, 1 minute after the claimant had contacted the police about the trespassing children, another call came through. This time, it was from a different resident, and he was reporting a fatal injury. That fatal injury was not just the culmination of growing tension. It was the direct result of California's Stand Your Ground law, which enables the right to defend with lethal force if imminent danger presents itself. And it would be this law that became an excuse in this case, even though no such circumstance even existed. Number 5. William Billy Milligan, born in 1955, endured an abusive childhood in Miami, Florida, leading to emotional detachment and early signs of identity confusion and criminal behavior. Initially facing minor theft and assault charges, his crimes escalated to armed robbery and assault against women. The 4-part docuseries, Monsters Inside: The 24 Faces of Billy Milligan, chronicles his life, crimes, arrests, and highly publicized trial. Arrested in 1975 for assault and armed robbery, Milligan was paroled 2 years later. Months after his release, he was arrested again for assaulting 3 women. Experts began questioning if Milligan suffered from dissociative identity disorder, which fractured his mind into 24 personalities, 10 being prominent, including malicious and protective monsters inside. His lawyers successfully argued he was not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming 2 alternate personalities. Reagan and Adelana committed the assaults. Institutionalized until 1986, a change in diagnosis prompted Milligan's escape and attempt to live under another alias, though he was soon readmitted. Extensive therapy reportedly led to personality integration, and the series concludes with unanswered questions. Was the dissociative identity disorder genuine, or was it all a ploy to excuse his crimes? Prosecutors claimed the insanity defense was false, but Billy Milligan died of cancer at the age of 59, taking the answers with him. The docuseries explores his story, but leaves the ultimate truth elusive. Number 4. In 1980, when the name John Wayne Gacy made headlines, the term serial slayer was not part of the standard lexicon. It was that year when he'd been convicted of the homicide of 33 boys and young men. His unassuming nature, simple work field, cheerful clown persona, and law enforcement looking the other way would ultimately enable Gacy to continue his crime spree for years. Before 2022, we only knew the basics of Pogo, the homicidal clown. He would reel in his victims under the guise of a job in contracting. He'd befriend them, allow them to come and go, build trust, and then he would pounce. The men just wouldn't make it home, and for a long time no one could figure out why. Gacy was also indiscriminate in his choice of victims. The only aspect that remained consistent throughout was that all of his victims were male. Aside from that, they were all different from one another. For 40 years, this was all we knew about the Gacy homicides, until Joe Berlinger decided to take a close look at the chilling, infamous spree. In Berlinger's efforts to bring us closer to understanding the social circumstances that allowed a slayer to hide in plain sight for so many years, he would scour 60 hours of previously unreleased audio recordings, which culminated in the 2022 3-episode true crime docuseries, The John Wayne Gacy Tapes. In this 3-parter, we explore the true story of the serial slayer, as his entire life unravels in mere hours. The audience is given a never-before-seen insight into the conversations with the serial slayer and his legal defense team. Explanations, excuses, lies, justification, rationalization, and finally, confession. These are the components that make up a dark and chilling documentary. Number 3. She was a photographer, a mother, a wife, a person, and now she's gone. Birgit Meyer, resident of Lüneburg, Germany, was still married to successful entrepreneur Harold in 1989. But the marriage became turbulent, and for the sake of their daughter, Yasmin's sanity, and their own, they had to make the decision to get a divorce. The lengthy process of legal separation was still underway on the 14th of August, 1989. It would be that evening that Birgit headed over to her husband's home with certain details still needing to be clarified regarding the divorce. The decision was amicable, and neither side contested it. Therefore, there were no rising tensions. The visit to Harold's concluded with a settlement of 500,000 Dutch mark, and then a disappearance. Upon leaving the residence, Birgit would vanish, and eyes quickly turned on Harold. Investigators would come to learn of the hefty settlement sum, suggesting that it could serve as the motive they were looking for to tie the estranged husband to the crime. But after intense interrogation, extensive searches, and a lack of evidence, he'd be cleared of suspicion. Several investigative efforts followed, including searches of waterways in nearby wooded areas, but authorities came up empty-handed. Then, almost 4 years later, the police named a new suspect in the case, and the case was reopened. But as with so many unsolved crimes, the familiar missteps of the blue uniformed boots dominate. Dig Deeper, The Disappearance of Birgit Meyer, offers a 4-episode insight into the journey a group of experts would embark on as they try to do what local police and investigators couldn't: find Birgit's body and name her slayer. In these 4 episodes, we're taken down the winding roads in the quest for justice. We meet Birgit's brother, Wolfgang, her daughter, and her husband, all of whom reflect on the bizarre circumstances that have led them here, and on the police's failure to investigate the case properly due to the distraction of the homicides. In their efforts to figure out what happened to a beloved relative, a secret life that existed beyond closed doors quietly emerged, and it was a life that may have cost Birgit hers. The documentary brings to light the possibility of a secret romantic entanglement, allegedly with a local gardener who had a violent past. Kurt Warner Wichmann came into the investigator's sights, given his intense past and his relationship with the victim. He was working on a property near the missing woman's home as a gardener. Wichmann had brought Birgit home one evening following a party, but she was unaware of his violent offenses, for which he'd been previously arrested. A 1993 search of his home discovered strangeness from soundproofed rooms to unlicensed weapons and chains and sleeping pills. It was obvious something was amiss here, and Wichmann knew how it looked too. The day that officers raided his home, he fled, only to become involved in a traffic accident that allowed investigators to apprehend him. Confinement, though, did not last long, and just 2 months later, he was pronounced deceased in his jail cell, without ever being convicted or charged with any crime relating to Birgit. Several years later, in pursuit of the truth, Wolfgang would gain entry to Wichmann's old home, a discussion point that becomes a focus in the documentary. In the home, a red-stained pair of handcuffs is found. DNA testing confirms the thought. The vital fluid was Birgit's. The documentary digs even deeper, only to uncover various objects buried in the garden of the home, shared by Wichmann and his brother, who was the only person who could have accessed the soundproof rooms. Among the objects were handbags, jewelry, shoes, weapons, tools, and car parts, leading to the assumption that Birgit may not have been his only victim. The series takes us through each agonizing day that concluded with the discovery of Birgit's body, the solution that investigators could never find all those years earlier, and the possibility that a serial slayer was active in 1989, unbeknownst to anyone until now, and all it would have taken was a little dig deeper. Number 2. Netflix's 6-part documentary, Wild Wild Country, chronicles the intense story of spiritual leader Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh and his followers. The series covers cults, true crime, politics, and the controversial figure of Ma Anand Sheela. In 1981, Bhagwan and his legion relocated from India to Wasco County, Oregon, due to escalating tensions with local government. Believing the US would protect their religious freedom, the cult ignored zoning laws to build a massive metropolis on a purchased ranch, complete with shopping centers, hotels, and an airport, attracting thousands of new members. A small retirement town of Antelope strongly opposed the violent cult empire, though. What began as a zoning issue quickly escalated into a war for Wasco County. The series shows how Bhagwan exploited legal loopholes, leading to a hostile takeover using arms, all documented through footage. Surprisingly, Bhagwan is not the main focus. The aggressor highlighted is Ma Anand Sheila, a media-hungry, politically cutthroat, and terrifying secretary. Sheila appeared in numerous interviews and was compared to one of history's worst figures. The only aspects that distract from this powerful woman are an explosion, a homicidal plot, a mass poisoning, and the Rolls-Royce driving guru focused on violent conquest. Number 1. Scrolling down the long list of documentaries Netflix offers, we come across a word that has always grabbed our attention: war. Our eyes scan the rest of the title: Mob War, Philadelphia versus the Mafia, an irresistible subject. If the title itself wasn't enough, the opening scene is bound to captivate us. It's the back and side of a man's head, the head of the snake, as the episode is so duly named. He's puffing on a cigarette, silence dominating the scene. Then those daunting words are spoken. The man explains how they just drove around every day looking for people to slay. "That's all I did," the man says. In just 3 episodes, the director brings us into the world of mob violence, specifically the mob violence that often found its way into headlines in the city of Philadelphia back in the 90s. The series delivers documented reports, surveillance videos, and audio recordings, all dating back to a time when a war between 2 factions was fought. On one corner, we have John Stanfa. On the other, we have Joey Merlino, and standing behind them are an uncountable number of loyalists. Through interviews with the former soldiers of the Mafia and accounts from law enforcement officials, we are given the opportunity to witness the unearthing of what perpetuated the brutality that unfolded in the city of brotherly love. Mob War, Philadelphia versus the Mafia, reveals how the arrest of Nicky Scarfo in 1986, a homicidal maniac, became the genesis of conflict. Succeeding Scarfo as head of the Mafia was Stanfa, who'd allegedly been handpicked by the 5 families to take over the mob in his predecessor's place. His position was intended to bring stability, in contrast to the erratic behavior of the leader who came before him, and the destruction that he imposed. The idea, according to the documentary's interviewees, was to make money, not to make headlines. That was Stanfa's point of view anyway, an idea that would be overshadowed by Merlino, who viewed Sicilian-born Stanfa as an outsider without the authority to tell them what to do. Merlino and his followers were indiscriminate. Their designer clothes and flashy cars drew significant attention, and their aim was to take over the entire operation right under Stanfa's nose. But there was also a third opponent in the ring during that era. In the documentary, we hear from federal agents and technicians who made use of informants to gather intelligence, and how they bugged the very office of a known mob attorney, where Stanfa began to slip and talk more directly about Merlino and his crew, and how he would slaughter the lot of them. This conversation came about following the assassination of one of Stanfa's followers, a planned hit by Merlino. The documentary not only overflows with the violence of the Mafia, but also the risks involved in trying to bring them down. The risks that FBI agents and law enforcement faced on a regular basis. Not to mention all the citizens of Philadelphia who became the unwitting victims in a fight that they were not even involved in. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future videos. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.